What if one bold choice could change your whole life? That's the question running through Eleanor Whitmore's head the morning everything began to shift. The early sun slid through the crystal windows of the Whitmore mansion, laying long stripes of light across the Persian rug. Eleanor sat stiff at her vanity, while her maid tugged and pinned her golden hair into an elaborate style that made her scalp throb. In the mirror, her mother hovered close, settling a family pearl necklace against Eleanor's throat. 3 generations, old and heavy with duty. "Remember, Eleanor," her mother said, voice as sharp as the hairpins. "Mr. Cornelius Ashford calls this afternoon. Be at your most charming. This match will secure our place for years." Eleanor's stomach flipped. Cornelius Ashford was 30 years older than she was, with cold gray eyes and a breath that reeked of cigars and brandy. She'd met him twice at society events, and had felt his gaze crawl over her like a line of ants. But her father's gambling had left ugly debts, and the Ashford fortune would cover them. Eleanor knew what that meant. She was the payment. "Yes, mother," she murmured, fingers crushing the lace handkerchief in her lap. The Whitmore home stood grand on Beacon Hill in Boston. Old money, older rules. Every room gleamed with Italian marble and French tapestries. Chairs cost more than most people earned in years. To Eleanor, though, all the gold frames and crystal lights felt like bars on a fancy cage. When her mother swept out, Eleanor dismissed the maid and walked to the window. Down on the cobblestones, carriages rattled by and men in tall hats hurried to their day. Her palm cooled against the glass. Did any of them feel as trapped as she did? A gentle knock pulled her back. Charlotte, her younger sister, slipped inside and shut the door. "I brought you something," she whispered, pulling a folded newspaper from under her shawl. "You might find the advertisements amusing." Eleanor smiled at the Boston Daily Advertiser, Charlotte's small act of rebellion. Their father forbade newspapers, claiming they filled a young lady's head with wrong ideas. Eleanor opened it carefully, glancing past stories of railroads and political scandal, until a tiny notice in the back stopped her cold. "Respectable rancher seeks bride. Man of 28 years, owner of 500 acres in Montana Territory. Seeks honest woman of good character for matrimony. Must be willing to work hard and embrace frontier life. No fortune required, only a genuine heart. Those interested, write to James Mackenzie, Copper Creek, Montana Territory." Eleanor read it once, then again, then a third time. Montana. The books showed skies so wide they seemed to swallow the world. Mountains brushing the clouds, grasslands with no one in sight for miles. The opposite of Boston's tight rooms and strict rules. "What has you so absorbed?" Charlotte asked, peeking over her shoulder. Eleanor showed her. Charlotte's eyes rounded. "You can't be serious." "Why not?" Eleanor asked, though her heart pounded at the thought. "He asks for no dowry, no family name, just an honest heart and hard work." "You know nothing about him," Charlotte said. "He could be anyone. A criminal, a madman. Or he could be my way out," Eleanor whispered. She pictured Cornelius Ashford's damp hands and claiming smile. "Sometimes the devil you don't know is better than the one you do." The idea rooted in her mind like a stubborn weed. While her mother fussed over seating charts and flowers for a wedding Eleanor hadn't agreed to, Eleanor found herself composing letters in her head to a stranger in a faraway land. The final push came a week later. During a garden party, Cornelius cornered her in the conservatory. He stood too close, his hand heavy on her waist as he described how married life would go. He would train her, he said, because young brides needed a firm hand to keep them right. His eyes glinted with pride, as if he were buying a new horse. That night, Eleanor chose. She wrote to James Mackenzie as Miss E. White, near her own name, but not quite, to hide her trail. She kept it plain. She said she was healthy, educated, willing to work, and hungry for a simple life. She left out the mansion, the pearls, and the looming marriage to a man who made her skin crawl. She bribed a housemaid to mail the letter. 3 weeks later, a reply came in a bold, careful hand. "Miss White, I'm pleased by your letter. Life here is hard, but honest. I offer no luxury, but I promise respect and partnership. If you are sure, I will send funds for passage. The choice is yours. The choice is yours." No one had ever written that to her. Maybe no one had ever even thought it about her. What followed was a blur. She hid away small sums of money. She sold a few pieces of jewelry her grandmother had given directly to her. She traced rail lines west on smudged maps. Charlotte covered for her when she slipped out to buy sturdy clothing and a plain carpetbag. Then her parents announced the date. 1 month until the wedding to Cornelius. Eleanor couldn't wait any longer. After midnight, while the house slept, she dressed in her simplest traveling dress, still far too fine for where she was going, and packed only what she could carry: 2 calico dresses, work gloves, a comb, and a worn Bible she didn't read but couldn't quite leave behind. She left a letter on her pillow, an apology with no details, knowing it would break her mother's heart. Charlotte met her at the servant's door, eyes wet. "Write to me," she whispered, pushing a small purse of coins into Eleanor's hands. "Use a false name, but write." "I will," Eleanor promised, hugging her tight. The walk to the station felt like a dream that could turn to danger at any shadow. But she reached the ticket window, slid her money over with shaking hands, and boarded the train. As Boston slipped away in the mist, Eleanor pressed her forehead to the glass and watched her old life fade like smoke. Travel west was nothing like the cushioned carriages she knew. In Chicago, then Omaha, she switched trains. Cars grew rougher. People changed, too. Farmers with sunburned faces, miners with tired eyes, families carrying everything they owned. Her nice dress drew stares. In Omaha, she spent precious money on 2 plain calico dresses and sturdy boots that pinched until they didn't. Days blurred. Endless flat land rushed past. Tiny stops were nothing but wooden platforms and wind. Her back ached. Meals were whatever she could buy at the next station. Still, with every mile she felt lighter, as if the train carried off the weight of duty and expectation along the tracks behind her. Nebraska opened into Wyoming, and the world rose into rolling hills. Mountains appeared, small at first, then taller each day. The sky stretched from edge to edge, huge and empty and full of promise. She had never seen so much space. People told stories. A widow with 3 little ones spoke of a husband lost to pneumonia in their first Dakota winter. A grizzled prospector told of men going mad on hope that never paid. The tales scared Eleanor, yes, but they also felt honest, like the ad promised. When the train reached its end in Miles City, Montana territory, Eleanor stepped onto a platform of mud and noise. The town was a raw strip of board fronts and open doors. The air smelled of horses, dust, and something wild. She had telegraphed ahead. James Mackenzie would meet her. She stood with her carpetbag, trying not to look lost. Cowboys leaned on posts and squinted at her. A painted woman in a bright dress smiled from a saloon doorway, as if she knew exactly how the world worked and found it funny. "You must be Miss White." Eleanor turned. A tall man in worn chaps and a wide hat approached. He looked about 30. His face was sun-browned and serious. His eyes were the blue of a winter morning. He was handsome, yes, but guarded. "Mr. Mackenzie," she said. He nodded, looking her up and down in one quick, unreadable glance, taking in the fine dress she tried to make plain. His jaw ticked. "We'll be married today," he said, without fuss. "Circuit judge is in town now. Won't be back for 4 weeks." Eleanor blinked at his bluntness. "Yes," she said, surprising herself by not arguing. He lifted her bag like it weighed nothing and started walking. She hurried after him, her new boots slipping on the muddy street. The courthouse was a small building that also handled the post and land papers. The judge, a thin man with round glasses, married them with the speed of someone who had done it 100 times. 2 clerks signed as witnesses without looking up. "Do you take this woman?" the judge asked. "I do," James said. "Do you take this man?" Eleanor paused. She was marrying a stranger in a land as foreign as the moon. Then she pictured Cornelius's smile and said, "I do." Just like that, she was no longer Eleanor Whitmore of Boston. She was Mrs. James Mackenzie of Copper Creek, Montana Territory. He slid a plain gold band onto her finger. No diamonds. No crowd. No music. Just a ring and a firm handshake from a busy judge. Outside, James helped her onto a wagon seat with hands that were rough but careful. "It's a full day to the ranch," he said. "We'll stop at Henderson's for supplies." Eleanor nodded. This man beside her was now her husband, yet she knew almost nothing about him beyond a few lines on paper. As the wagon rattled out of town, the last scraps of civilization fell behind them. The land was beautiful and frightening at once. Grass rolled like a green sea. Purple mountains stood far off like a painted backdrop. The sky felt bigger than everything. No houses. No people. Only space. James drove in silence, his eyes always sweeping the horizon. Eleanor studied him when he wasn't looking. Strong jaw, wind-lined face. Large hands settled easy on the reins. He was handsome, yes, but closed. Like a door she wasn't sure how to open. By the time the sun slid toward the peaks, there was no turning back. The ring on her finger felt heavy and strange and, somehow, freeing. She had chosen this. Whatever came next would be hers to live. They stopped at Henderson's trading post, a weathered building with a sagging porch. Eleanor's bones ached from the wagon's constant shaking, but she kept quiet. She did not want to look weak. "Wait here," James said, looping the reins. She watched him stride inside. A few rough-looking men lounged on the porch, staring at her with open curiosity. "Well, well," one drawled, spitting into the dirt. "Mackenzie got himself a mail-order bride." Eleanor looked straight ahead, remembering her mother's rule. Never grant rudeness your attention, though her mother had never imagined this scene. "Little thing," another said. "She won't last the winter. Eastern flowers fade fast in Montana." Heat rose to Eleanor's cheeks, but she kept her face calm. She had left one kind of judgment only to meet another. James returned carrying flour, beans, coffee, salt, pork, and ammunition. He loaded the wagon with practiced speed. The men quieted under his hard stare. "Congratulations on your wedding, Mackenzie." One tried, the mockery still there. "Thompson," James said with a curt nod. He helped Eleanor down. "Ma'am needs supplies. Mrs. Henderson will help." He pressed coins into Eleanor's palm, his fingers warm and calloused. "Practical things," he said. Inside, the store was a jumble. Plow blades hung near penny candy. Bolts of fabric lay beside lanterns and rope. Mrs. Henderson, a stout woman with a kind, knowing face, came over. "You're the new Mrs. Mackenzie," she said, more a statement than a question. "You're from back east?" "Boston," Eleanor admitted. "Long way from home," Mrs. Henderson said. "Let's set you up." Under her guidance, Eleanor picked sturdy undergarments, wool stockings, a simple bonnet, and basic toiletries. Mrs. Henderson added rough soap, needles, and thread, and a dog-eared copy of the Prairie Housewife's Companion. "You'll want this," she said. "Ranch life isn't Boston." Eleanor nodded, feeling the ground shift under her feet. The men from the porch had drifted inside, pretending to shop but still watching. As they whispered, one name rose above the low talk: Mary. Eleanor pocketed the name and the question attached to it. Back outside, James loaded her purchases without a word. As they left the post behind, Eleanor felt the weight of every look and whisper on her back. The ring on her finger seemed heavier. They rode on. The wagon creaked. Hawks cried far off. Grass waved in endless sheets, broken by red rock bluffs and scattered cattle. In Boston, you couldn't walk 10 feet without seeing a person. Here, hours could pass without another soul. Ranches over that rise, James finally said. Eleanor sat up straighter, hope and worry wrestling inside her. They topped the hill, and her heart dipped. The ranch was a small log cabin, a tired barn, a few sheds, a chicken yard, and a horse corral. It was neat and cared for, but so simple that tears pricked her eyes. "It isn't much," James said quickly, a defensive edge in his tone. "But it's sound. 500 acres, good water, cattle doing fine." "It's fine," Eleanor managed, swallowing her disappointment. What had she expected? A palace on the prairie. As the wagon rolled into the yard, 3 people appeared. A weathered older man limped from the barn, a slim Mexican boy trotting after him, and a middle-aged woman wiped flour from her hands on the cabin steps. "That's Hank, the foreman," James said. "The boy is Miguel. Helps with the horses. Mrs. Novak keeps the house." They gathered as James helped Eleanor down. She felt their eyes on her dress, her soft hands, her fancy posture. Mrs. Novak's face gave away little, but Eleanor didn't miss the pinch of doubt around her mouth. "This is Eleanor," James said. "My wife." Hank touched the brim of his hat. "Ma'am." Doubt still sat in his eyes. Miguel stared openly until Mrs. Novak flicked his ear. "Welcome, Mrs. Mackenzie," the housekeeper said in a thick Czech accent. "Long travel. You rest." "Thank you," Eleanor said, grateful for even that much. Inside, the cabin was clean but spare. One main room with a stone fireplace, rough table and chairs, a small kitchen area, and a ladder leading up to a loft. "Mrs. Novak stays out back," James said. "Hank and Miguel sleep in the barn. We'll use the loft." Eleanor nodded, mind spinning. In Boston, a staff of 12 ran the house. Here, 3 people kept a ranch alive. "I'll show you the bedroom," James said, climbing the ladder with her bag. Eleanor followed, skirts catching on the rungs. The loft was tidy. A rope bed with a simple quilt, a washstand, a small trunk, and a tiny window framing endless grass. "Supper time is 6, James said. I'll leave you to settle in." He climbed down, leaving her alone with the fact that men's shirts hung on the pegs and boots lined the wall. She would be sharing this tight space with a man she barely knew. The thought fluttered cold in her chest. She unpacked slowly. Her few dresses looked out of place beside James's worn work clothes. The silk ball gown she'd foolishly kept made her laugh at herself. A gentle knock. Mrs. Novak appeared with fresh sheets. "I bring linens," she said. The bed was already made. The sheets were an excuse. She wanted a closer look. "Thank you," Eleanor said. "Mrs. Novak, may I ask?" The men at the post mentioned someone named Mary. Mrs. Novak's face closed. "Not my place. Ask husband." She left without another word, and Eleanor's question swirled. Supper was quiet and stiff. Mrs. Novak served good stew, and the men talked cattle. Eleanor tried to ask about branding, and Hank said gently, "Maybe not for a lady's ears." "If this is my home, I ought to learn," Eleanor said, trying to keep her voice steady. James watched her. "We'll see," he said, which sounded like maybe. After they ate, the men headed back to chores. Mrs. Novak waved off Eleanor's offer to help. "You not know this work," she said, not unkindly. "Better you rest." Eleanor sat by the fire. James worked on his ledger at the table, scratching numbers while the wood popped. In Boston, evenings meant talk and music. Here, silence filled the room. "I'll go to bed," Eleanor said at last. "Up soon," James replied. "Ranch starts early. No need for you to wake." Eleanor climbed to the loft, changed behind a blanket hung like a curtain, and lay staring at the ceiling. Hours later, she heard James climb the ladder and settle on the far edge of the bed, careful not to touch her. She didn't know whether to feel safe or unwanted. Morning broke with a rooster's cry and men's voices outside. James was already moving among the cattle when she peered out the small window. When had he gotten up? Downstairs, the kitchen smelled of strong coffee and biscuits. "Good morning," she told Mrs. Novak. "Men eat already," Mrs. Novak said. "Food for you." The biscuits were heavy. The coffee was bitter. Outside, Eleanor watched the steady rhythm of ranch work through the window. Everyone had a job, except her. "Mrs. Novak," she asked, "could you teach me to cook?" "You not know." The woman looked truly surprised. "I want to learn," Eleanor said. "I need to be useful." Mrs. Novak studied her. "Hard work. Not for soft hands." "My hands will toughen," Eleanor said, more confident than she felt. A small smile. "Maybe you not so delicate. We start with bread." The morning became a blizzard of flour and mistakes. Eleanor's first dose stuck to everything. Her second was dry as chalk. "Not like that," Mrs. Novak said, guiding Eleanor's hands with patient firmness. "Hands remember what mind forgets." By noon, Eleanor had a loaf that was bread. Heavy, but bread. The men returned for the midday meal. Hank chewed slowly. "Well," he said at last, "it's bread." Miguel swallowed a grin and got a tap on the arm for it. James didn't comment, but Eleanor caught him slipping his chunk to the dog. In the afternoon, Eleanor walked the ranch. The chicken coop leaned. The garden struggled behind the cabin, heat wilted. Everything bore the look of hard use. In the barn, Miguel brushed a gentle mare. "She's lovely," Eleanor said. Miguel jumped, then smiled shyly. "Her name is Dulce," he said. "Sweet." "May I?" Eleanor asked. Miguel taught her to move slow, let the horse sniff her first. Dulce's coat felt like warm velvet. "Do you ride, Senora?" Miguel asked. "Side saddle," she admitted. "In parks." Miguel's face said that didn't count. At supper, Eleanor helped again. Her gravy was lumpy. The men salted it extra. That night, she and James lay in the usual careful space. Eleanor replayed the day, her failures, the looks, the whispers at the post. Would she last the winter? Was everyone right about Eastern flowers? "You did well today," James said into the dark. "Learning the bread." Before she could answer, his breathing evened. It was the first kind thing he'd said to her, and she tucked it close like a small coal of warmth. Days slipped into a hard pattern. Mistakes, sore muscles, and tiny wins. Eleanor's soft hands blistered, then calloused. The rooster ambushed her when she gathered eggs, shredding her skirts while her pride bled. The cow kicked over the milk pail, and Eleanor sat in the mess, close to tears. "Ain't shame in not knowing," Hank told her gently. "Shame is in not learning." So she learned. Mrs. Novak taught stews that didn't burn and biscuits that didn't crack teeth. Miguel showed her how to read animals, how to walk calm and steady so as not to spook them. Even Hank shared how to check a cow's eyes and breath. James stayed distant. He spoke of tasks, not feelings. He rose before dawn and dragged home after dark. Their talk would pass the salt. Storms coming. Need anything from town? At night, they shared a bed and an ocean of silence. The isolation pressed on Eleanor like a heavy coat. Days passed without seeing anyone else. No callers. No music. No talk beyond cattle and weather. She wrote letters to Charlotte with no way to send them. Town was a day's ride, and James went only when he had to. One afternoon, the drum of hooves broke the quiet. 3 women rode in, straight-backed and sure. Mrs. Novak came up from the root cellar, her face softening. "Bannister sisters," she said. "From Double B, 5 miles north." Eleanor smoothed her hair and stepped outside. The women swung down with easy grace. They were tall and sun-browned. "You must be the new Mrs. Mackenzie," the eldest said. "I'm Sarah Bannister. My sisters, Ruth and Alice." "Eleanor," she said, aware of her awkward curtsy. Ruth smiled. "We heard Mackenzie got himself a bride by post," Ruth said, not unkind. "Thought we'd see if you need anything." Alice was blunt. "Heard you're from Boston. That's a long way." "Come in," Eleanor said, grateful for company. "I'll make coffee." The sisters exchanged looks. "We'll help," Sarah said. In the kitchen, they moved with practiced ease, while Eleanor fumbled with the pot. Alice took over gently, measuring grounds like a science. "Everyone learns," Ruth said. "When Sarah married Tom, she burned half the meals her first year." "At least I didn't set the curtains on fire," Sarah said. "That was once," Ruth laughed, and even Eleanor smiled, feeling something loosen in her chest. Over coffee and Eleanor's misshapen cookies, the sisters shared news and advice. "Start your garden early," Sarah said. "Mornings and evenings for water," Alice added. "And use chicken droppings. Smells terrible. Works." They stayed till the sun slanted low. Eleanor learned more in that one visit than in weeks of struggling alone. As they left, Sarah pulled her aside. "Ranch life's not easy," she said softly, "especially if you weren't raised to it. But James Mackenzie is a good man under all that quiet. Give it time." Eleanor wanted to ask about Mary, about the weight James carried in his eyes. The word stuck. After they rode off, the cabin felt emptier. At supper, Eleanor said, "The Bannister sisters called today." James's head lifted. "What did they want?" "To welcome me," she said. "They were kind." He grunted. But later, before bed, he added, "Bannisters are good folks. Tom helped me when I started." It was the most personal thing he'd offered. Eleanor tucked that away, too. Autumn crept in. Frost sugar-coated the grass in the morning. Under Mrs. Novak's watch, and with the sisters' tips, Eleanor coaxed a small harvest of potatoes and turnips. Her bread became acceptable. Her stews were better. She faced the rooster with a stick and won. The milk cow still watched her with suspicion, but didn't kick the bucket. Yet James's quiet disapproval lived like a draft under the door. He never scolded, but she caught the set of his jaw when she bumbled. One evening she heard him tell Hank, "Should have known better than to advertise for a wife. A man gets what he pays for." The words cut. That night she lay rigid. She'd given up everything, was trying her best. What more could she do? A wind howled in from nowhere. James came in late, snow crusting his coat. "Storm's coming," he said. "Bad one. Need to move stock to shelter." All night, lanterns bobbed in the yard as the men wrestled cattle into safer spots. Snow stung like needles. By morning, drifts climbed half the cabin door. The water bucket froze by the stove. "Early blizzard," Mrs. Novak said grimly. 3 days, maybe. They worked like a small army. The men fought the storm to feed animals. Eleanor and Mrs. She could offer the truth in return. "Cornelius Ashford," she said. "He saw women as prizes to own. He told me once we married I would have no say. Not where we lived, not my time, not even," he climbed her neck, but she finished, "not even about children." James's jaw tightened. "And your parents agreed?" "My father had debts," she said. "Ashford's money would wipe them clean. I was the cost." "So you ran," he said. "I chose," she corrected softly. "A stranger who promised respect and partnership." She gestured at the space that had been between them for months. "Even if we're still learning how." He stood, restless, and paced the window. "We won't save the ranch," he said abruptly. "I did the sums. even selling some horses you're sowing, the men's savings will be short. Morrison knows it. He's likely already set the papers to take a place. Then we start again somewhere else, she said. He turned, startled. You would leave. I already left everything once, she said simply. At least this time I wouldn't be alone. Something flickered across his face. Pain, hope, she couldn't tell. He looked back out at the dark land. I failed Mary, he said. Seems I'll fail you too. James Mackenzie, Eleanor said, sharper than she meant to. I did not travel 2,000 miles to marry a quitter. We have 10 days. A lot can happen in 10 days. The next morning brought a crack of light. Tom Bannister rode in with news. Cavalry at Fort Russell's buying remounts, he said. Paying top dollar for sound, steady horses. James had 3 that might qualify, but they needed polishing. He threw himself into the work, patient and exact even when his hands shook from fatigue. Eleanor did her part. She took her silk things to town with Miguel. Mrs. Henderson's wife clucked over the stitches and bought the lot, ordering more. Eleanor started taking in mending from the fort as well. By week's end, her small pile of earnings reached $30. 3 days before the deadline, they spread money on the table and counted. 160, James said, voice heavy. Still 40 short. The horses, Eleanor said. The buyer comes tomorrow. If he takes all 3, James said. If not, that night Eleanor prayed. Not like the stiff prayers of her childhood, but a simple plea to whoever listened over empty places. Morning came bright and sharp. A captain from the fort arrived with 2 sergeants. James let out the horses, showing their training, his mouth a thin line. The captain checked teeth and hooves with a practiced eye. I'll take 2, he said at last. Bay and chestnut. 35 each. The gray has a slight weakness in the near fore. $70 would help, but it didn't close the gap. Eleanor saw the way James's shoulders dipped a fraction and hated the look on his face. As the soldiers prepared to lead the 2 away, Eleanor made a fast, awful choice. She went to the barn and brought out Dulce. What about a brood mare, she called. James whirled. Eleanor, no. She's in foal, Eleanor told the captain. Good bloodlines. Gentle and proven. The captain ran a hand down Dulce's neck. Fine mare, he admitted. We don't usually buy breeding stock. Think of it as an investment, Eleanor said. 1 horse now. 2 in spring. Behind him, a sergeant murmured that the regiment's breeding needed improvement. The captain frowned, considering. 40, he said. 50, Eleanor answered. You know she's worth twice that. Don't, James said, voice raw. Dulce, I'm doing this, Eleanor said, eyes steady. For us. 45, the captain said. Final. Done, Eleanor said before James could speak. They led Dulce away. Eleanor watched the mare's ears flick once, then forward. She did not let herself cry until the soldiers were only dust. Inside, Mrs. Novak pulled her into a brief, fierce hug. You did right, she said. Men let pride blind them. An hour later, Eleanor returned to the kitchen. The money lay on the table, counted and straightened. Enough to pay the banker, with $5 to spare. Victory sat heavy in her chest. James came in, looking older, like the sale had carved years from him. Dulce was the first good thing I bought after. He stopped, swallowed. Mary said the mare had kind eyes. You were right about one thing, he said, meeting Eleanor's gaze. I've been so scared of losing again, I couldn't see what I was losing. He took a breath. You came here expecting a partner. I gave you a stranger who slept on the other side of the bed. We saved the ranch, Eleanor said softly. We can work on the rest. He stepped closer. For a moment he hovered, as if unsure. Then his rough fingers brushed a tear from her cheek. I'm sorry about Dulce, he said. And for hiding behind fear. He paused. I don't want to do that anymore. We're not strangers, she whispered. Not now. He kissed her. It wasn't wild. It was careful and real, a promise rather than a blaze. When they parted, he glanced toward the door. I should check the barn, she teased, a small wobbly smile. In a bit, he said, surprising them both by sitting. Tell me about Boston. Your sister. What you loved there. What you hated. So they talked while the late light crept over the floor. James told her about growing up the third son, with no land to inherit, about riding west with nothing but grit and a plan. He talked about trying to build a perfect life by working harder than anyone. Thought I could outrun bad luck, he said. Turns out, sometimes it outruns you. And now? Eleanor asked. He looked at her and then at the small, warm room. Now I've got a wife who turned her last beautiful dress into money and sold her favorite horse to keep this place. Makes a man rethink things. That night, when they climbed to the loft, the stiff line they'd kept for months felt gone. They lay close enough to share breath. Tomorrow we pay Morrison, James said. And then, Eleanor said, we start again. Spring will come. We'll plant. We'll raise calves. Maybe, she stopped then added, maybe I'll finally learn to make stew without burning it. And I'll teach you to ride proper, he said. In the dark, his hand found hers. We'll learn to be married. That sounds right, she said. Wind rattled the window. Not a blizzard, just winter, reminding them it still ruled. Inside, the cabin felt warmer than it ever had. For the first time since stepping off the train, Eleanor let herself believe this could truly be home. Spring crept back by inches. Snow retreated from the hills, revealing dark rock like shoulders under a blanket. Calves tottered at their mother's sides. The garden, under Mrs. Novak's sharp eye and the banister's advice, sprang green. Eleanor and James worked side by side, their partnership settling into something steady. One golden afternoon, a far drumming rolled toward the yard. Eleanor shaded her eyes and smiled as James and Miguel drove a tight bunch of Mustangs into the corral. Among the herd, a honey-colored mare kept her distance, eyes bright and clever. That one's trouble, James said, swinging down. And smart. Could be the best horse we've ever trained, or the worst. Maybe both, Eleanor said, watching the mare's ears flick. What will you call her? I thought you might name her, James said. Consider her yours. If you can gentle her. Eleanor's breath caught. After losing Dulce, she hadn't expected this. Can we afford? We can, James said, face softening. Besides, a horsewoman needs a horse. She kissed him there in the yard, and Miguel whooped like a boy, because he was one. Hope, she said, eyes on the mare. She looks like Hope. Training Hope took patience and grit. The mare tested every rule, then rewarded calm hands. Eleanor spent hours at the corral, working slow and steady, feeling more herself than she had in any ball gown. That was when Sarah Bannister rattled into the yard, dust smoking from her wheels. Eleanor, she called. Thank the Lord. We need you. What is it? Eleanor hurried over. Alice, Sarah said. Baby's coming hard. Doctors and Billings. Ruth's with her. We need hands. Mrs. Novak, Eleanor called, already tying Hope. Come quick. Within the hour they were in Sarah's wagon with clean cloths, boiled tools, and steady nerves they didn't feel. The Double B was a storm of worry. Ben paced like a trapped animal. Alice was pale and scared. I can't, she whispered, gripping Eleanor's hand as a contraction tore through. You can, Eleanor said, calm on the outside, water on the inside. You've faced worse. You rode into a blizzard last winter. You set your arm yourself when the doctor was drunk. You're the bravest person I know. A weak laugh fluttered out of Alice. That was different. It's all courage, Eleanor said. And you have plenty. Mrs. Novak took charge, hands sure and kind. Hours dragged. Outside, thunder rolled and rain battered the windows, as if the sky joined the fight to bring new life into the world. At last Mrs. Novak said, "Now, push." A thin, fierce cry cut through the storm. "A girl," Mrs. Novak declared, satisfaction in her voice. Small but strong. Alice cradled her daughter, tears tracking through sweat. "What should we name her?" Ruth asked. Alice looked at Eleanor. "Eleanor Mary," she said. "If that's all right." Eleanor couldn't speak, only nodded, heart aching with joy and the gentleness of the memory that name carried. They stayed until dawn, making sure both mother and baby were steady. On the ride home, Mrs. Novak said, "You were good in there. Not many can be calm." "I was terrified," Eleanor admitted. "Yes," Mrs. Novak said. "But you didn't show it. That is strength." She hesitated. "You will be good mother." Eleanor's hand drifted to her middle. She had blamed the tired mornings on hard work and winter. Now maybe not. James was waiting in the yard, worry sharp in his face. "Alice." "Perfect," Eleanor said, grinning. "A little girl." They named her Eleanor Mary. Something passed over his expression at Mary's name. No longer a knife, more a tender bruise. "Mary would have liked that," he said quietly. That evening, watching sunset wash the sky pink and gold, Eleanor took James's hand. "I think I'm a child," she said, the words tumbling out. He went perfectly still. Shock, wonder, and fierce joy chased each other across his face. "You-wee," he laughed, breathless. "I can't even say it." "I'm not certain yet," she said quickly. "But I've missed, and I'm sick in the mornings." He pulled her close, careful, as if she were a spun-glass thing. "A baby," he whispered against her hair. "Our baby." "You're happy?" she asked, though she could feel it shivering through him. "Happy." He pulled back, so she could see his eyes shine. "Eleanor, you gave me a reason to breathe again. A partner. A future. And now a family." They sat under the first stars and dreamed. A boy with James's steady strength? A girl with Eleanor's stubborn hope? Maybe both. "We'll add on to the cabin," James said, practical as always. "Can't keep a baby in that loft." "Thank goodness for Mrs. Novak and the Bannisters," Eleanor said. "Little Eleanor Mary will need a playmate." His easy talk of future and kin warmed her to her bones. The next day brought a letter, Charlotte's looping hand on the envelope. Eleanor read it on the porch, tears blurring the ink. "Dearest E," it began, "your letters kept me sane. Mother and father held a memorial last month. Everyone believes you dead. Only I know the truth, and I guard it. Cornelius married the Peyton girl 6 months ago. She looks miserable. You escaped. I pray you found what you sought. Good news." James asked gently. "The best," Eleanor said, smiling wetly. "I'm officially dead to my old life. There's no going back. Do you want to?" he asked. She looked at the cabin, the garden, the man who had become her home. "Never," she said. On Sunday they went to town. News flew faster than any wire. Congratulations met them at every door. Mrs. Henderson pressed a soft bundle into Eleanor's hands. "Baby blanket," she said, trying to sound gruff. "Made too. Don't need both." The minister's wife offered a basket of outgrown clothes, clean and mended. Even Morrison at the bank managed a stiff nod. "Children are the territory's future," he said. On the way home, wagon piled with gifts, Eleanor felt a quiet pride. The mail-order bride who wouldn't last the winter had found her place. As they unloaded, a lone rider approached. Jake Thornton. Eleanor tensed before she could stop herself, but James's hand landed steady on her arm. "Jake." Thornton dismounted. He looked different, cleaner, clearer somehow. "Heard you're expecting," he said, eyes on some middle distance. "Wanted to say congratulations." "Thank you," Eleanor said, understanding what it cost him to ride up that lane. I'm leaving Montana, he said. Got work in Wyoming. He looked at James. Mary wanted me to be better. Figured I'd try being a man she'd recognize. We wish you well, James said. Thornton nodded once and swung back into the saddle. She'd be happy for you, he said, and then he was gone, a last ghost settling quiet. That evening, they stood by the fence and watched Hope graze, sunlight warm on their shoulders. Eleanor rested a hand on her still flat belly. Soon there'll be little feet running here, she said. Learning to ride. Growing up under this sky. You ever miss it? James asked. Back east. I miss Charlotte, Eleanor said. But the rest, the parties, the rules, the pretending? No. You ever look at me and see her? She asked softly. Mary. No, he said, pulling her in. You're not the same. She was my past. You're my present and my future. You and this little one. The girl who'd fled a gilded cage had found a real life in a place that gave nothing for free and returned everything earned. The man who'd locked his heart shut had opened it, not all at once, but honestly. Tomorrow would bring new trouble. It always did out here. But tonight, with the sky deepening to velvet and the first stars pricking through, they were whole. Two people who had chosen each other and built something worth defending. Autumn didn't just arrive. It crashed in hard and early. Frost silvered the grass before the leaves had fully turned. Riders passed more often on the road beyond their fence, faces set and watchful. Talk in town grew colder, too. Whispers about big outfits tightening their grip on land and water, while small ranchers tried to hang on. The trouble wore a familiar smile when it finally rode into their yard. Carl Morrison returned with two strangers at his side. He didn't bother tying his horse, just sat and smirked like a man certain of the end of the story. Mackenzie, Morrison called. I've got an offer you'll want to hear. James came from the barn with Hank and Miguel closing in behind him. Eleanor stepped onto the porch, one hand bracing the curve of her belly. The baby moved with a firm little kick, as if listening. Say your business, James said. Simple. Morrison tipped his hat with mock politeness. The Cattlemen's Association is consolidating. These scattered little spreads, his glance slid over their cabin like it offended him, aren't efficient. We'll buy your land at a fair price. Not for sale, James said. Morrison's smile didn't slip. Spring might come with a low creek this year. Happens when folks upstream have new rights. He let that hang. Cattle need water. That's unlawful, Eleanor said, anger cutting through her. Water rights are set by the courts. Courts listen to power, Morrison said softly. You be wise to take the offer before misfortune finds you. He turned his horse with a tug and rode out, his men following. James watched them go, mouth a thin line. They plan to starve us out, he said. We won't let them, Eleanor answered, the baby shifting under her palm. We've come too far to fold now. They weren't alone. That evening, lanterns bobbed down the lane as neighbors arrived, Tom Bannister among them, along with men and women from half a dozen small places up and down the valley. Their faces held the same stubborn set. They came to all of us, Tom said. Either sign over or get squeezed. We think we stand a better chance standing together. So they formed an alliance over Mrs. Novak's coffee and Eleanor's best bread, now edible, sometimes even good. They compared notes, shared plans, split watch duties. Eleanor, thickening with child and forbidden to chop wood or haul water, took the work she could, paperwork, lists, letters, petitions. The education her mother prized for teas and music nights became a tool sharp enough to matter. Trouble sharpened, too. Fences got clipped in the night. Cattle strayed. Someone fouled a watering hole with offal. Once, a shot cracked near the barn, close enough to splinter a rail. Try and scare us, James said, reloading with steady hands. They're doing a decent job of it, Eleanor admitted, feeling the baby kick hard as if in answer. But fear couldn't be the last word. She sat up late, bending over the kitchen table with her belly pressed to the edge, drafting petitions to the territorial governor, copying names until her fingers cramped. Mrs. Novak scolded. James hovered. Eleanor kept writing. December snapped the ground hard underfoot. Morrison returned with a crowd. Cowboys who weren't neighbors and lacked the look of men who worked their own land. But so did the alliance. When Morrison rode into the yard, a wall of small ranchers stood ready to meet him. You're trespassing, James said, rifle steady in his hands, but pointed down. Just here to repeat our generous terms, Morrison replied, but the corners of his mouth twitched. He hadn't expected company. We've got something too, Tom Bannister said, drawing out a sheaf of papers, the ink still dark and neat. Petitions to the governor, signed by ranchers and townsfolk alike. Copies already sent. Your water games won't stand under the law. Eleanor watched color rise in Morrison's face. All those nights at the table hadn't been for nothing. You think paper keeps you safe? He sneered. Out here. A voice cut across him. Carl Morrison, it called crisp as frost. A U.S. Marshal rode in with soldiers from Fort Russell at his back. He swung out of the saddle, a folded document in his hand. I have a warrant for your arrest on charges of conspiracy, intimidation, and violating federal water law. The cowhands scattered like birds. Morrison stared like a man who couldn't believe the world had shifted without him. This isn't, it is, the marshal said. The governor's office takes a dim view of starving out settlers. As the soldiers took Morrison, his eyes burned across the crowd. This isn't over, he spat. It is, the marshal said, not unkindly, but firmly. Cheers rose, quick and rough. People thumped each other's backs. Eleanor reached for James, but pain cinched her stomach so hard she gasped. The baby, she said, clutching James's sleeve. I think it's time. The yard's cheer flipped to boisterous concern. Mrs. Novak took command like a general, clearing the house and calling for hot water, clean cloth, and the banister. Sisters. The men were shoved onto the porch, where they pretended not to hear Eleanor's cries and failed completely. First babies take time, Tom told James, holding him by the shoulders as if to anchor him. James paced anyway, jaw tight, hands helpless. Each sound from inside yanked at him like a rope. This baby didn't want to wait. Where hours had stretched endless during Alice's labor, Eleanor's raced. Mrs. Novak's voice was steady and sure over the storm of pain. Now, push. A thin, fierce cry answered. A boy, Ruth called from the doorway, face glowing with sweat and delight. Strong lungs. James nearly knocked her aside. Inside, Eleanor lay pale and shining. In her arms was their son, small, perfect, and serious-faced as his father. He's beautiful, James whispered, rough fingers gentling as they touched the baby's cheek. What should we call him? Eleanor studied the tiny features, the dark wisps of hair, the determined little mouth. You choose, she said softly. James was quiet a long moment. William, he said at last. For my brother. William James Mackenzie. Will, Eleanor said, the name fitting like it had been waiting. It suits him. Word traveled as fast as winter wind. Neighbors returned with gifts of quilts and bread, jars of preserves, and knitted socks the size of walnuts. Even people who'd held themselves apart from the fight arrived with congratulations. Henderson from the trade store shook James's hand till it hurt. You stood up, he said. We all saw it. That night, as snow fell soft outside, Eleanor nursed Will by the fire, while James kept watch with a face that couldn't quite contain what he felt. Any regrets? He asked in a low voice that was mostly wonder. Only one, she said. That Charlotte can't hold him. Maybe when he's older, James said, surprising them both. We could go east. Introduce him properly. Eleanor pictured her sister's face, bright with joy and relief. I'd like that, she said. Winter settled clean and quiet. With Morrison jailed and his scheme exposed, the pressure eased. The alliance stayed. However, friendships forged under fire didn't vanish with one snow. People still shared tools, traded labor, swapped news and laughter when the cold pressed in. Eleanor learned a new balance, motherhood in one hand, ranch chores in the other. Will slept in a sling while she checked the hens or stirred stew. James, who had once held himself apart like a man standing back from a coal fire, now reached often, lifting Will, kissing Eleanor on his way out the door, catching her eye across the room just to share the moment's small goodness. Spring washed the land in green again. Calves bucked and chased. Hope, the honey-colored mare, settled into her training and then surpassed it, sharp and willing, a joy under saddle. Dulce's absence still stung, but Hope helped heal the bruise left behind. Eleanor rode the fence lines with Will snug against her, the mare steady as a rock beneath them. This is your world, she whispered into small, warm ears. These hills, this sky, this work. On a mild May day, the Bannister sisters arrived with little Eleanor Mary, now toddling on sturdy legs. The children played on a blanket, grabbing at grass and laughter while the women mended and talked. Look at us, Sarah said suddenly, half amused. Proper frontier families. I didn't expect this, Alice said, bouncing her daughter. But then, when did life ever stick to what we expect? I didn't expect to belong, Eleanor said quietly. I only hope to endure. The belonging still surprises me. The best things do, Ruth replied. When the wagon turned back toward Double B, Tom lingered a moment with James. The two men spoke low. James's face shifted from surprise to thought, to something that looked a lot like purpose. What did he want? Eleanor asked after they rode off. The territory's forming a new county, James said slowly. They need a sheriff. Tom says I should consider it. Eleanor looked at him. Really looked. The job would bring steady pay and authority, but it also came with new risks. She weighed what she knew of him now. His fairness, his steady hands, the way he'd stepped forward when others needed him and stepped back when he might have claimed the credit. What do you think? She asked. I think I want Will to grow up where law means something, he said. Where men like Morrison can't bully a valley and call it business. Then we decide together, she said. Like everything else. They talked for days. Counted what they'd need on the ranch when he was away. Who could help cover, where danger might come from, and how to meet it. In the end, the choice felt clear. Can you make a difference? Eleanor asked quietly. I believe so, he said. Then say yes. The ceremony took place in town on a bright June morning, scented with sun and dust. Eleanor stood with Will in her arms, while James raised his hand and swore the oath. Judge Patterson, the same man who'd married them with all the fuss of stamping a paper, spoke this time with gravity and warmth. You've both come far, the judge said afterward, shaking their hands. The tense man and frightened girl I married. Well, I don't see them anymore. Not gone, Eleanor said with a small smile. Changed. They rode home, with James's new badge catching light at his chest. The valley opened wide and welcoming before them. Eleanor thought about the strange thread of luck and choice that had carried her from a Boston bedroom to this sunlit road. Penny for your thoughts, James said. I was thinking about headlines, she teased. Mail-order bride runs from pearls to prairie. Marries a man nothing like she expected. He chuckled. Sounds like one of those sensational stories. Maybe, she said, looking at him, truly at him. But ours ends better. This isn't an ending, he said, fingers reaching across to squeeze her hand. It's a beginning. Sheriff Mackenzie settled into the work with the same quiet skill he showed with cattle and storms. He listened more than he talked. He treated neighbors and trouble as trouble, whether it wore a fine coat or a trail-stained duster. Some days were dull as fence watching. Some were sharp as a blade. Through all of it, he came home to supper, to Will's sleepy smile, to Eleanor's steady presence. The ranch didn't falter. Hank and Miguel kept it humming. The alliance meant help when it was needed and company when the days ran long. Mrs. Novak grumbled and worried and fed everyone better than they deserved. Summer poured gold over the grasslands. Hope took to her new role as family horse, somehow knowing when Will was aboard and moving like the ground itself, reliable and patient. Eleanor rode better than she ever had, seat sure, hands light, the landscape a language she now understood. One afternoon, while James mended a gate and Will napped to the soft creak of a rocker, a rider appeared at the edge of the yard. He sat quiet until James looked up, then lifted a hand in greeting. Jake Thornton. Eleanor's heartbeat leaped, then settled. She stepped onto the porch. James straightened, but didn't reach for his gun. "Jake," he said simply. Thornton swung down. The man who'd once burned like a fuse now looked less haunted. "Heard you took the badge," he said, almost smiling. "And that you've got a boy." "We do," James said. Thornton cleared his throat, eyes on the horizon. "I wanted to say Mary would have liked that. She wanted a house full of noise." He swallowed. "I'm heading to Wyoming. Job on a big spread. Figured it was time to leave past ghosts in their graves." "Good luck," James said, and meant it. Thornton tipped his hat. He glanced at Eleanor. "You've got Steele," he said to her. "Don't let him forget his heart is safe with you." Then he mounted and rode out past and present, nodding to one another and parting ways. As far-off thunderstorms stacked blue on the horizon, the three of them, man, woman, child, stood at the fence and watched their horses graze. The sky stretched enormous and calm overhead. Eleanor rested a hand on her small son's back and felt the slow rise and fall of his breathing. "Do you miss the life you had?" James asked, not for the first time, but differently now, curious, not afraid. "I miss my sister," Eleanor said. "But the rest, the staging, the politeness that hides knives?" "No." She paused. "Do you ever see her when you look at me?" "Mary?" he asked. No, he gathered her in, careful of the baby between them. "You're you. She made me the man I was. You make me the man I am." The mail-order bride had found something bigger than escape. She'd found home and purpose, and a love that showed up in chores and choices, in hands held at night and coffee poured in the mornings. The quiet rancher had found his way back to hope, not all at once, but honest and lasting. And like all true Western stories, theirs kept moving. When the county needed a fair hand, James wore the star. When fences sagged, he hauled posts. When storms rolled in, he read the sky and moved the herd. Eleanor kept the book straight, the garden generous, the meals hot. She held Will while he cried and laughed when he laughed and taught him the names of birds and constellations. She wrote to Charlotte and dreamed of a trip east that felt less like duty and more like sharing joy. Neighbors came by with problems and news, stayed to share stew, and left with less weight on their shoulders. Babies were born. Old men passed on their brands. The valley breathed, hurt, healed, and grew. One clear morning brought a small crowd to the yard, Tom Bannister and Sarah and Ruth and Alice, children trailing behind like chicks. They had pie and a hand-me-down cradle and a dozen stories. They had patience for Will's endless why, and admiration for Hope's well-mannered pride. They had a life of their own to return to, and still took time to fill the Mackenzies' porch with laughter. "Look at us," Sarah said, waving at the lot of them. "Who'd have thought all this would come from a newspaper ad?" "Desperate times, bold choices," Alice said, winking at Eleanor. Bold and right, Ruth added. Eleanor looked at James, at Will, at the land stretched easy and strong. Worth it, she said simply. Every mile. As the sun slid toward evening and painted the grasslands gold, chores called from every corner of the yard. Fences needed tightening. A hinge wanted oil. The garden, always the garden, needed weeding. Challenges waited, as they always would. But the weight of them felt like a thing two people could carry together. They saddled up for one last loop around the pasture, James with his badge tucked out of sight, Eleanor on hope with Will snug in her arms. The three silhouettes moved across the field, long and certain in the late light. The sky arched above, wide and watching. Out here, happy endings didn't arrive on a plate. You built them. You mended them when they tore. You chose each other day after hard day, and that choice made the story. Eleanor and James had saved each other, first from loneliness, then from fear, then from the slow pull of giving up. In doing so, they built a life worth defending, a family, a home, a future in a land that demanded everything and gave it back tenfold. Thank you for riding along with their journey. I hope their courage and stubborn love stuck with you. Where are you listening from today? Drop a comment with your city or country. I love seeing where our trail reaches. If this frontier romance hit the spot, tap subscribe to From Wild West for more true-hearted Western love stories. And I'm curious, which moment grabbed you most? Did you see Jake Thornton's turn coming? Share your thoughts below. Until next time, keep heading toward your own horizon. Happy trails, partners.